It's time for Media Meltdown, starting with Jasmine Crockett, who claimed that several Republicans were taking donations from Jeffrey Epstein, but having clearly not done her research. The only problem with that is the Jeffrey Epstein who was giving donations to Republican Lee Zeldin was an entirely different person, a physician named Dr. Jeffrey Epstein, not the convicted sex offender. Here is Jasmine Crockett on CNN, not really being grilled on this, of course, but being asked if she'd like to perhaps correct the record.
You talked about Republicans taking money from a Jeffrey Epstein. Here's what you said.
Who also took money from somebody named Jeffrey Epstein, as I had my team dig in very quickly. Mitt Romney, the NRCC, Lee Zeldin, George Bush, Win Red, McCain Palin, Rick Lazio.
You mentioned Lee Zeldin there. He's now a cabinet secretary. He responded and said it was actually Dr. Jeffrey Epstein, who's a doctor that doesn't have any relation to the convicted sex trafficker. Unfortunate for that doctor, but that is who donated to a prior campaign of his. Do you want to correct the record on the people that you...
Listen, I never said that it was that Jeffrey Epstein, just so that people understand when you make a donation, your picture is not there. And because they decided to spring this on us in real time, I wanted the Republicans to think about what could potentially happen, because I knew that they didn't even try to go through the FEC. So my team, what they did is they Googled, and that is specifically why I said a Jeffrey Epstein. Unlike Republicans, I at least don't go out and just tell lies. Because it was not the same one, that's fine. But when Lee Zeldin had something to say, all he had to say was it was a different Jeffrey Epstein. He admitted that he did receive donations from a Jeffrey Epstein, so at least I wasn't trying to mislead people.
It's like watching a car crash in slow motion. I mean, what on earth is she saying? She wants to give her team credit because they used Google. Well done, Jasmine Crockett's team. I mean, who are probably just as bright as she is. But Lee Zeldin's reply to Jasmine Crockett's claim was brilliant. He wrote, yes, Crockett, a physician named Dr. Jeffrey Epstein, who was a totally different person than the other Jeffrey Epstein, donated to a prior campaign of mine. No freaking relation, you genius. Now, CNN's Caitlin Collin pushes back gently and asks Jasmine Crockett on maybe her statement that perhaps she was, in fact, misleading.
Now, have I dug in to find out who this doctor is? I have not. So I will trust and take what he says, is that it wasn't that Jeffrey Epstein, but I was not attempting to mislead anybody. I literally had maybe 20 minutes before I had to do that debate.
Yeah, but people might see that and say, well, you're trying to make it sound like he took money from
I did not know.
A registered sex offender.
No, but I literally did not know. When you search FEC files, and that's what I had my team to do, I texted them and I said, listen, we're going up. They are saying that she took donations.
Right, but someone might say, well, your team should have done the homework to make sure it wasn't the convicted sex trafficker.
Within 20 minutes, you could not find that out, not from just doing a quick search on FEC. So, number one, I made sure that I was clear that it was a Jeffrey Epstein, but I never said that it was specifically that Jeffrey Epstein, because I knew that we would need more time to really dig in.
Joining us now is Chief Economist at the Institute of Public Affairs, Adam Crichton. I mean, what a defence from Jasmine Crockett there. You know, I think often we lose a few brain cells every time we listen to Jasmine Crockett speak. She really is an embarrassment for the Democrats.
Yeah, look, I think it was very funny how she said that, you know, she wasn't specifically talking about the Jeffrey Epstein, just, you know, that she was factual. It was a Jeffrey Epstein, and, you know, she should have known. That's going to be a very common name, actually, in New York, of all places, obviously. Fairly Jewish name. So it's pretty embarrassing that, given her enormous staff, she probably has 20, 30 personal staffers. She's a congresswoman, that no one bothered to check this before she went out there with this information. So she'll probably sack someone over it, I imagine. But you know, at least this gave us some humour in this saga, which is never ending. And you know, I mean, the Jeffrey Epstein has been dead now for what, six years or something, 7 years, and it's still, you know, he certainly casts a long shadow over US politics.
Absolutely. And the Democrats keep trying to kind of bring it up. And it's interesting now, of course, the files are finally being released. But Jasmine Crockett, I mean, that was a train wreck of an interview on CNN.
Yes.
But Adam, I want to talk to you about the US economy. Last week's job report suggests that the US economy is actually much stronger than expected, with the exception of California. The report showed that the US economy created 119,000 jobs in September, but it's a different story in Gavin Newsom's California. The New York Post wrote that instead of jetting off to climate change in conferences in Brazil, maybe Gavin Newsom should in fact focus on changing the climate for jobs at home. Adam, can I get your assessment?
Well, firstly, the main point to make is the strength of the US economy broadly, because remember, most experts said it was all going to collapse because of the tariffs, and as you just pointed out, it's still booming. But more specifically, your question on California, well, this is not really surprising. I mean, this is the Victoria of the United States, if you like. It's an extremely left-wing state, very, very high regulations, extremely expensive energy, and so it's no surprise that the job market there is weak. I just had just earlier, I had a look at the price of electricity in California, 30 US cents an hour, which is by far the highest in the United States. The states right next to it, Arizona, is only 12 cents an hour. So you can see the huge incentive to move manufacturing out of California. And of course, they had they had long lockdowns as well. I know that was 4 or 5 years ago, but lots of people left the state, and I think that's had a big impact there on sentiment. So yes, it's not. The economy's not great there. And of course, everything has to be looked through the prism of the 2028 presidential election, right? All of these statistics, because probably when Gavin Newsom does run, the Republicans are going to say, well, look what you did to your state.
100%. It needs to be looked through that prism. And you kind of compared California to Victoria. Well, it's interesting. Billionaire James Packer has lashed out at former Victorian Premier Daniel Andrews, who of course pushed Victoria into the world's longest lockdown during 2020. But James Packer has taken aim at the Labor politician's economic management of the state, calling him human filth. This was in an interview with Joe Aston's digital news site Rampart, and Packer has given a pretty scathing assessment of Daniel Andrews. Let's listen to this.
Daniel Andrews is about my least favourite person in the world. I think Daniel Andrews not only ruined Victoria, he almost ruined my life. I couldn't speak more lowly of Daniel Andrews. I think he's human filth.
Geez, this sounds like a Joe Aston column.
There you go. I hope he sues me.
I mean, I think James Packer speaks for many Victorians who had to endure that long lockdown. It also comes as street artist Jared Gretsch painted Daniel Andrews in a mural in Melbourne CBD, labelling him a dictator. Again, many Victorians labelled him that too. And if we need any reminding of just what Dan Andrews is truly like, this was his message to Victorians in 2020.
Hundreds of thousands of Victorians who rung the police assistance line because they've had a suspicion that next door or across the road or down the street are doing the wrong thing. And they're doing the right thing and they're angry about it. And some people have sort of looked down their nose at that, dobbing in your neighbour. Well, no neighbour has the right to do the wrong thing. We've all got to see this through.
Dobbing in your neighbour. I mean, that's his legacy. That was his message to Victorians. And what's he been doing this year? Been spending time at China's military parade. I want to get your thoughts, Adam, on Packer's comments. He also had a go at Andrews and saying that he really torched the Victorian state government's balance sheet, warning that the debt burden that he imposed was now impossible to fix. Can I get your thoughts on all of this?
Well, look, I think more and more Victorians are coming around to James Packer's view. I mean, the costs of COVID were absolutely enormous, and a large part of those costs were in the future, which is now. And the state is burdened with this extraordinary debt. When Dan Andrews came to office, Victorian public debt was something like $18 billion, and it's about to be $194 billion. So, you do the maths, that's a very, very large increase. So his tenure was shocking, and I think more and more people are realising this. And actually, I should mention that next week the IPA has a large body of research coming out just on the Andrews legacy. I wrote one of the chapters on the fiscal policy, which of course was an absolute disaster. So I encourage your viewers to go and read that. But yes, look, more generally, it was a shocking premiership. And sadly, though, at the time, as you well know, it was very popular, strangely, because everyone had been scared by, by the media, by politicians, by so-called health experts. But I think that fear's gone away now, and people look back and they're just embarrassed, I think, a lot of people.
Yeah, a lot of fear tactics being used. It was such an awful time for many Victorians, and I'm looking forward to your work. It's such important work. We've got to look back, but looking at the state of Victoria now and moving forward, Victorian Premier Jacinta Allen says that she counts her predecessor, Daniel Andrews, as among her closest advisors ahead of next year's state election, saying that her government shares the same values and same priorities as her former boss. She says that she regularly draws on Daniel Andrews for advice. And it's interesting, Adam, this comes after an exclusive news poll for the weekend Australian revealed that the state's crime crisis is now threatening Jacinta Allen's premiership, with the opposition under new Liberal leadership with Jess Wilson seizing an advantage in the polls for the first time in more than 12 years. What are your thoughts looking ahead for Victoria?
Well, look, I mean, it's extraordinary that she's going out there in public saying that she likes to talk to Dan Andrews, when obviously, you know, just we've been discussing his reputation has been declining, surely. So I think that was a bad move. I think she'd be somewhat concerned about the new opposition leader in Victoria because it's something new. You know, most people seem to think that Jess Wilson will do a better job on the economic debate. Let's wait and see, because the Labor government story there on economics is very, very bad. So, yeah, look, I just think it's very odd that she's going out there talking about Dan Andrews like that. The crime crisis that you talked about, of course, this is created by the Labor government, by Dan Andrews, by Jacinta Allen when she was at the cabinet table for, 10 years or so before she was Premier herself. So they have created this problem, at least in part. So I think if the opposition here can finally get Victorians to understand that, then the opposition may actually have a chance.
Yeah, it's very interesting indeed. Not sure if I'd be name-dropping Daniel Andrews. I don't think it's a good thing at all. Moving away from what's happening here in Australia, let's talk about Ukraine. US President Donald Trump suggests that big progress could be being made in peace talks between Russia and Ukraine. The president posted on Truth Social, is it really possible that big progress is being made in peace talks between Russia and Ukraine? Don't believe it until you see it, but something good may be happening. Now, of course, US Secretary of State Marco Rubio said that a tremendous amount of progress had been achieved amid peace talks with Ukraine regarding the ongoing conflict, and he did say that there's still some work to be done after this meeting between Ukrainians and European negotiators in Geneva, Switzerland. Now, of course, there are some concerns, though. Ukraine and its European allies had expressed concern over the leaked proposal seen as favouring Russia. Adam, can I get your assessment on the progress that's potentially being made?
Well, look, I think it's good that President Trump is trying to get peace here. He's certainly done a lot more than most presidents in recent memory at trying to bring about peace, so he deserves credit. But look, on the specifics of the war, I'm not too confident, frankly. I mean, it's going to be over when it's over. There's been so many false starts on these negotiations for over a year now. I mean, of course, Trump actually met Putin, and that didn't go anywhere. And, of course, Zelensky's been to Washington who knows how many times, and that doesn't go anywhere either. There's a big split in the Republican Party in the US about the war. There's the MAGA side, the base don't like the war to continue, but then the old kind of neocons do want it to continue. So there's a lot of political pressure on Trump internally in the US, and of course the Europeans want the war to keep going. I think what's my view worth on this, but I think it's going to be good for both sides if it stops.
100%.
I think the reality is on the ground that some concessions are going to have to be made to Russia, unless Britain and France want to send their young people to go and fight. And I seriously don't think that's the case. I don't think the US wants to do that either. And if they're not going to do that, then I'm afraid the reality on the battlefield is that Russia's winning. Okay, it might not be decisive, but they are winning. They control territory. They're taking more towns. So if you're not going to go and fight them, then you've just got to face reality. Yeah,
that's exactly right. There is a possibility that Ukraine could lose this war down the track. So I think it is in everyone's interest that there is peace, absolutely. Look, just finally, before I let you go, thoughts on the baby bonus coming back. New South Wales Liberal leader Kelly Sloan has called on the federal government to bring back the baby bonus. Let's listen to this.
1 in 7 families in New South Wales has fertility struggles. If we're talking about cutting immigration, we need to boost our homegrown community. I'd love to see the federal government look at things like Peter Costello's baby bonus. We are in a baby recession. We need a baby boom.
Adam, is it a good idea?
Well, she's certainly right that fertility is really scarily low at the moment, and we have to do something. Look, whether it's baby bonus, I'm not personally in favour of a baby bonus. I think the evidence shows they don't really work. They don't increase the number of babies that much, or if they do increase them, they increase the number of babies amongst people who we might not really want having babies for the cash. You're right. I mean, if you're having a baby for $3,000, that's a problem.
It's not a great incentive.
not the right reason. I think she's right to talk about it as an issue, but there's nothing stopping her, having that policy in New South Wales. The state government could have a baby bonus, for instance, if it wanted to. But look, it's good that she's talking about ideas and trying to differentiate the opposition from the state Labor government, because the previous opposition leader, I mean, he was a nice man, but I mean, they didn't really stand for anything different from the Labor government.
No, absolutely. Adam Crichton, Chief Economist at the Institute of Public Affairs. Thank you so much for your time. Great to talk to you.
Yeah, thanks very much, Gabrielle.